ready to start. May we have roll call? Dr. Volpe? Mr. Castile? Ms. Castile is not present. Dr. Davis? Here. Dr. Davis is present. Ms. Ellis? Present. Ms. Ellis is present. Mr. Garvey? Mr. Garvey is not present. Ms. Holloway? Ms. Holloway is present. Mr. Mallory? Present. Mr. Mallory is present. Mr. Morris? Here. Mr. Morris is present. Mr. Orange Jones? Present. Mr. Orange Jones is present. Mr. Rock? Present. Mr. Rock is present. Ms. Boitier? Here. Ms. Boitier is present. We have a quorum. Thank you. First agenda item.
Your consent agenda is ready for approval, adding items 4.1, 4.2, 5.1, and 6.1.
May I have a motion, please? Mr. Rock moves, Mr. Moore second. Any discussion? Any objection to the motion? Motion passes. Next item, please.
First item is on page 89, item 4.3, consideration of the fiscal dialogues as a result of the fiscal risk assessment process for fiscal year 2020-2021. Recommendation is to receive.
Need a motion to receive. Mr. Morris, second Ms. Holloway. Any discussion? Any objection to the motion? Hearing none, motion passes. Next item, please.
On page 100, item 4.4, consideration of LDE and RSD contracts of $50,000 and over. Recommendation is to approve. Handout's been distributed on this item as a contract was added yesterday.
Okay, do I have a motion to approve? Mr. Rock, second Dr. Davis. Any questions, or do we have a presentation?
Well, one of the things that we wanted to do is, and I recognize it's late in the evening, but we launched what's called the Strong School Systems Initiative over the last year, and we had a set of pilot schools that participated in this. And the whole idea is just to help systems think about strategic planning and academic outcomes in a comprehensive way at their system level. And we had some really positive reviews from some of the, from really all of the participants in that process. And so we are, with our stimulus dollars, as I indicated before, we're going to be supporting additional systems throughout the state in the coming year to help them do strategic academic planning, to help them be in a better position in terms of things to do for their kids. And I think we have a couple of system leaders that are present here today that just wanted to talk about that. And it is related to one of the contracts that's in your packet. Is that right, Dr. Tillman?
Yes.
And I believe those superintendents are here, so if they can come to the table.
Item 7.
Sorry, correction. I think we're going to have 7.1.
I think, yeah, this is
Yeah,
something.
correction.
You'll be there front row when it's time.
4.4. Is that it, Dr. Carter?
Yeah.
Okay. Dr. Davis?
I need to recuse myself from 4.4.
Which one?
The LSU contracts.
Okay. Any other discussion or questions? Any objections to the motion? Hearing none, motion passes. Next item.
On page 133, item 4.5, consideration of federal and state grants and allocations to the LEAs, Type 2 charters, Type 5 charters, approved non-public schools, and community-based organizations, competitive and other. Recommendation is to approve.
Need a motion, please. Motion by Mr. Morris, second by Mr. Jones. I'd like to repeat 4.5. Any questions or discussion? Ashley? Which item, please?
4.5.
4.5. Any others? Any other questions or discussion? Any objection to the motion? Hearing none, motion passes. Next item, please.
On page 160, item 6.2, consideration of AG funding cycle activities, approval of AG statewide programs for fiscal year 2021-2022. The recommendation is to approve the Strong School Systems program.
May I have a motion, please? Motion by Mr. Miller, second by Ms. Holloway. Any questions or discussion? Any objections to the motion? Hearing none, motion passes. Next item.
On page 167, item 7.1, consideration of a report regarding the spring 2021 results from the Louisiana Strong Start 2020 implementation survey and a status report concerning ESSER funding. Recommendation is to receive the report.
Motion to receive, please. Mr. Moore, second. Dr. Davis. Thank you.
We do have a presentation here. Our chief of staff, Dr. Temple, deputy chief of staff, Mitchell, and we have a couple of our superintendents here to talk about this as well.
Thank you. We're going to go ahead and allow our superintendents to speak to the Strong School Systems Initiative. They've been here diligently waiting today to share all the work that they've been doing through our Strong School System Initiative, so we'll turn it over to you all.
Good evening. Beginning my service as superintendent of East Louisiana Public Schools, I was a principal, supervisor, and executive director in the district for 7 years. Working in this small rural district, I've always felt blessed to work alongside diligent and talented people. However, it often felt like we weren't working toward a common purpose. There was a lack of collective vision that we all could not articulate. There was also a beautiful plaque and banner in our central office with a mission statement, but it wasn't driving the day-to-day work of our schools. When I became superintendent in 2019, I was determined to change that notion that our district lacked vision and direction. My goals included further developing the talent and expertise of my team and developing a concrete and meaningful strategic plan that could drive the work of all stakeholders in our community. Being asked to participate in the Strong School Systems Initiative pilot was indeed a blessing for East Louisiana Public Schools to develop a concrete plan with experienced experts based on a tested model. Our participation in the pilot has allowed us to make significant progress on both of those goals. Our 7-member steering committee for this initiative included a principal, 2 members of our academics team, a member of our operations team, a member of our financial team, a school board member, and myself. Even in a small district, it can be very easy for team members to operate their own silos. In collaboratively developing a strategic plan, we have broken down many of those silos and centered in the student experience and more of our decision making. I've seen many team members grow as system level thinkers, ready to not just implement systems, but to innovatively create and refine systems that work to meet the needs of our students. As someone committed to developing the leadership of my team, I'm also proud that the Strong School Systems Initiative allowed the principal on my steering committee to participate in the Louisiana Superintendent's Academy. Through her work in LSA, she recently accepted a job with the Louisiana Department of Education as a Director of Leader Development. And while we certainly miss her and we know that her students miss her, we also know that students in East Louisiana Public Schools and across rural communities of our state only benefit when strong leaders who understand the needs of our schools and our communities are working for us here at the state level. These partnerships will continue to be critical as we successfully implement our strategic plan. From our teachers and our principals to our board members, our families, the East Louisiana Public Schools family is extraordinarily excited about Homegrown Pride, the strategic plan that we've collaboratively developed and launched in late July of this year. Now we are all working toward a common goal that we all understand and can articulate to anyone we encounter. We have all embraced this plan because not only were our voices heard in the drafting process, we are also meeting the needs of our system and our students. Instead of a mission statement on a banner that we forget about, we have a shared commitment and 6 priority areas that we all will address over the next 5 years to help us fulfill those commitments. Our stakeholders are particularly excited that this strategic plan involves concrete, observable initiatives. And this year, those initiatives include ongoing curriculum training in math, English language arts, science, and an improved assessment system. We certainly appreciate the ongoing support that we will receive to help us progress monitor the implementation of this plan and work on those initiatives. In East Louisiana Parish, we've heard people talk about change before, but real change, real growth is more than just talk. Real change happens when you make a plan, work together, and follow through. Thank you.
Thank you. John?
Yes. Superintendent of Assumption Parish School District, thank you for having me here. I want to thank Dr. Tullerton. And I also want to thank Dr. Matthews as well as the leadership team here. Thank you, Dr. Broman, as well. Very simple, straight to the point. We want to talk a little bit more about the process, but for me, it was 4 key things. Number one, it gave our stakeholders a voice. We went out into the communities, we surveyed, we had focus groups, we talked to students, parents, teachers, principals, community leaders, business leaders, so everyone had a voice. Number 2, it gave the district autonomy, because every particular strategic plan is unique to that community. Every community is different, so it wasn't a cookie cutter, everybody's going to do this. So it gave us an opportunity to create a strategic plan that fits our needs in our community, so we had autonomy. Number 3, I call this leveraging resources. When I was a principal, in order for me to really make my school an A school, I had to do something I call leveraging resources, meaning every single person, every employee in the building, teachers, administrators, everyone had to own the accountability system that we had in place. Everyone had to own outcomes for students. So in this process, leveraging resources allow our district office to work collaboratively. HR was a part of this process. Business services was a part of this process. Curriculum and instruction, a part of this process. Special education, a part of this process. So everyone was working collectively for a common goal, which is obviously outcomes. Outcomes for our community, outcomes for our students. And the final thing that I took away from this whole process, it provided a clear plan to improve schools. Very simple. A clear plan to improve schools that all stakeholders had a voice. So this time I'm going to turn it over to Mrs. Britney Allen. She's my Director of Curriculum and Instruction. She'll talk a little bit more about the process.
Good evening, everyone. While I'm not a superintendent, I am the Director of Curriculum and Instruction, newly hired in January. So I can't rave, I can only sing the praises of this process and how it has helped me and our team in our current position, in my current position, to grow and move forward. This process of being part of the pilot program has given us a process of improving our district. We were able to identify the priorities that we needed to improve upon and come up with a strategic action plan of how we were going to address those priorities. And we're all in this together. Even though I am over curriculum instruction, we had members of our team over finance, human resources, so that we're all clear about what we are, where we're headed and what we're trying to reach in each year of the implementation of our strategic plan. And being a part of this program is going to help us to replicate this process in future years to come. So again, I can't rave enough about being a part of this pilot program and what it has done for our small school district.
Thank you, Ms. Allen. We also have a card from Nikki McCann, who's superintending Caldwell, but I think she must have had to leave.
She did, but she wanted to speak, so I told her to send me what she wanted to say, and I read it for her.
Go right ahead then.
Okay. So she said she just really appreciated the leadership and helping the process and helping her team analyze all sorts of data, including surveys, focus groups for all the stakeholders, and making us dig down into what our strengths and weaknesses are. And then we were able to take our weaknesses and align them with vetted strategies for improvement. It was a relief to me when the Come Back Louisiana initiative was rolled out, because many of my strategies were already aligned. We will definitely be able to take this process and move forward now that we understand how it all works.
Thank you. We have Jonathan Lovell from East Feliciana, who supports the recommendation but does not wish to speak. And now, we have Dr. Kimmel, presentation.
Thank you. I think as we go through our presentation today, you'll see how a lot of what we're talking about, we are really thinking through how do we implement initiatives here at the state level and how you see that through line all the way through to the classrooms. Of course, our testimonies, our input today from our school system leaders is really just a demonstration of what you will hear us present today, as we have been very intentional about strategically planning the ESSER dollars, how we are going to hold to public accountability, public transparency. You see the fruit of that work and what you heard today, and so I was really excited to make a connection between what our school superintendents are actually saying, because now you get to see the work that we're doing at the state level in order to make that happen and true at the district level. So I'll get started. Just as they talked about all of the stakeholder input, if you go to the next slide, you'll see that we've released 2 Strong Start spring surveys, and with that, those surveys actually released in 2 phases. And so those 2 phases, the first phase was completed by school leaders, teachers, students, families, and community members. And then phase 2, we asked our school systems to complete those surveys, and I smile because Superintendent Boucher, we had a lot of feedback just on timing. So when we look at just the results and the amount of input we received, we realized that we need to be more intentional about engaging with our school systems, just timeliness. We have to be more consistent and more considerate. So for phase 1, you all have received this information before. You see the stakeholders that we've engaged with, and also the number. We had about 11,000 respondents, and so you see the percentage of those respondents, and that was for phase 1. So then for phase 2, that's when we reached out to our school systems, and we outreached to about 200 of them, and we had about 90, which is about 50% of our LEAs respond. Again, that's on us being more considerate of timing when we release stakeholder opportunities for input. So you see the results there. So what were the Strong Start survey key takeaways from all stakeholders? If you look, we had about 71% of our students attending in-person classes and 19% attending hybrid classes. In-person classes were most preferred for our stakeholder groups. We had 4.5 out of 5 stars that spoke to COVID safety and our cleanliness at facilities. Student engagement and social emotional development and support were the lowest rated of all of our stars. When you look at the next bullet, our students responded that on a scale of 1 to 5, 3.5 would indicate how the difficulty or the challenge of their work or classwork assignments. About 95 of our 99 school systems offered summer learning, and we believe that's an awesome experience for our students. And then about half of our school systems indicated that they will continue to offer virtual learning as an option for families. So those were our big key takeaways from both surveys. The next slide really highlights for you how our stakeholders said we should spend our stimulus dollars. And so you see the green, purple, and I think on our colored slides you can see yellow, indicating the amount of responses that we receive from stakeholders. And so it shows you the commonality around student engagement and attendance, service for students with diverse learners, and mental health and well-being were those high priority areas where stakeholders said this is how you should spend your ESSER dollars. So now we get to investing our stimulus funds, and I think you all have seen these slides multiple times, just around how we're investing our funds by priority. As we know, our total amount of dollars received from our CARES Act or ESSER 2 and ESSER 3, you see that number at $311 million. And about 1% of that, of course, is reserved for admin. And then we have another % reserved so that we can have some contingency dollars throughout our period of availability. So we can go to the next slide. So for priority 1, we talked a lot today about college and career readiness and service readiness, which is our first priority. And you see those key proposed priority work streams. So as you look at that, you see the dollar amount invested for each one of those priority areas. When we talk about strategic budgeting and strategic planning, there's a dollar amount associated with each one of those focus areas. And so again, when you think about student engagement and attendance, under that category falls child welfare and attendance. You heard Mr. Bradford talk about that today. And also some investment around our dropout early warning system, dropout prevention, IGP, that's at about $3.7 million, ACT and pre-ACT, about $4 million worth of an investment there, and then redesign high school, about $7 million worth of an investment. Our next priority, equitable inclusive learning experiences. Again, you see that total amount there. And then also additional focus areas in which we prioritize to really highlight our equitable inclusive learning experiences. So again, for each one of those bulleted areas, we have itemized budgeted dollars in order to move that work forward. I'll move to the next priority, which is high quality teaching and learning. Again, we've had a lot of conversation today around literacy and just around the practice of teaching and learning, academic recovery, and accelerated learning. A lot of those plans live within this priority area. And so under those key proposed priority work streams, you'll notice the second bullet, which is accelerate, about $7.8 million of an investment. We have budgeted for that amount. Summer enrichment, about $20 million of an investment. After school programming, about $15 million. Arts, which also supports student engagement and attendance, about $4 million. High quality tutoring vouchers, and we know we've released a lot of information about vouchers, about tutoring, so about $40 million investment around our vouchers. Quality assessments, about $16 million, and then literacy screeners, about $6 million invested there, and then our statewide data system, about $2 million. And then priority 4 is really focused around our effective educator workforce. Again, you see the total investment amount around our proposed funding work streams. And so for our focus areas, you see teacher supports, and I won't call out all of them, but I know one thing that we talked about is having a learning management system for our professional development needs, and we're going to invest about $2 million there. Another thing that's probably been top of mind for you all that you've heard a lot about is the science of reading. So about $15 million worth of an investment in budgeted dollars for this priority area. Regional literacy coordinators, about $5 million of an investment budgeted for this priority area. So again, for each one of those key proposed priority work streams, you have budgeted dollars allocated so that we can support our school systems and students as they improve. And so priority 5, our last priority here, which is system structures and partnerships. Again, you see our key proposed priority work streams. And again, I won't read through all of the dollar amounts associated. Some of these are going to be very familiar to you all, but as we just heard our superintendents talk about strategic planning, for our priorities-based strategic planning initiative, we have about $3 million allocated. For our human capital strategy, about $2 million allocated. Broadband, about $10 million allocated. And again, you all have seen the slide that really captures some of our priority work. And so just wanted to give you, again, a high-level overview of how we have allocated and budgeted funds relative to our priority work streams. One of the things that we're really committed to around our ESSER dollars is really measuring the impact of these dollars. We talked about our commitment to stakeholders, ensuring that the dollars can be tracked to students. And so when you think about that, how will we measure our collective impact? And so we talk about what are our inputs, and right now for year one, they're very quantitative in nature. How are we determining who's participating, the number of people participating in the priorities that we allocated through EGMS? And so here you see our desire to really measure our academic return on investment. But in order to get to assessing our return on investment, we have to determine our collective impact, and then also how are we incentivizing our systems to participate in some of the initiatives that we have provided, as I discussed previously. So with that, one of the things that we've talked about, I think since January, this is really exciting, that we have been able to present to you all today, which will actually be released, I think, around 4:30. It should be live and ready as our fiscal dashboard. And so on the slide in front of you, you have a screenshot that's highlighting the fiscal dashboard. So we know that we've received about $4 million from ED in relief funding. And those $4 million are really directed towards our birth through 12 academic recovery efforts. So here you see 3 funding sources. Our total amount allocated.
I continue to struggle with this one.
It's good.
Okay. So about 3 funding sources you see on this slide. So you see our ESSER funding sources, our gear total funding, our gear total fund spend, and then our non-public. So again, this gives a very transparent view of the funds that we have received from ED. If you look at the next slide, you actually see our statewide totals. It provides 2 views. The current statewide view shows how funds have been budgeted by the recently released state priorities and focus areas. So when we speak to collective impact, what's not only what's happening at the state, but also at the LEA as to how they are budgeting their funds that they've received. And then the other piece of this is something that we wanted not only our LEAs to be able to analyze and interpret and read this information, but also all stakeholders. So you actually see a very simple, I think, explanation of our expenditure categories. So you see after-school programming, facilities, indoor air quality. These were all allowabilities that our school systems had by which they could budget their funds. And so we, again, wanted this to be very simple to understand, and so you have that explanation here in this view. And then I think on the last, yes, on our last screenshot here, you see a sample school system. And this is how our school systems budgeted their items and their expenditures. So again, you see a very transparent and accountability display of how our school systems actually budgeted their money. Again, this fiscal dashboard should be available now. I think the link at LouisianaBelieves.com or Louisiana Comeback can be accessed. And all of the data that you see presented, I think was live as of 6:30, but it should be updated today with more current information. Next, yes.
How frequently will it be updated going forward? Just curious.
We will update that information quarterly because of our per reporting and how we report or how systems report their expenditures to us. So the next thing I want to speak to is our operational plan. We have been really doing this work for we're going into our 2nd year of our administration. And when you think about taking stock of all of the work that we've done, we have tried to really identify what was the work happening, the current state of affairs. And through that, we really had to do some procedural, technical work first. And so in doing that, we worked across all of our offices to develop an operational plan. And so with that operational plan, we've been able to look at what teams are doing, how we are doing, and how do we know what's working. But before we can answer what's working, we had to really analyze and determine what was the work that we needed to continue, start, or stop. And so this operational plan gives us the answer to those questions. So the next screenshot actually shows you just a snapshot of the work of the operational plan. So you see in column 1, the office, you see the division listed, the initiative and the project. So you've heard me talk through this. But we know that in order for us to be strategic and intentional, just like our school systems talked about, we had to not only establish goals, as Mr. Moore said, he's pressed on us to speak to goals, but also objectives, and then what are those key performance indicators that will really help us measure our progress towards achieving our objectives and then our goals. And so the operational plan, you see one snapshot here, but this document is massive because it really reflects all of the work that's happening in our agency. The other part that I would highlight are those 2 last columns that really speak to our current state. So when we look at the data or the objectives or the performance indicator, we ask all of our offices, what's the current state of that objective or that indicator, and then what's our target? And so those are 2 really key important pieces. You don't see information there because that's information we're continually collecting. Just for, I think just a clear understanding when we talk about the operational plan, just so that you all can have background knowledge, we put some just common definitions here. So when we talk about critical goals, what are we asking our team to establish? When we talk about our priorities, focus areas, and initiatives, what is our common language so that we're all on the same page when we're building out the operational plan? So along with our operational plan, we also have an operational cycle, which tells us when all of these things are taking place. And so we also wanted you all to see that information. So our operational cycle, our annual cycle, begins at the start of the state fiscal year, which is July 1, and then it ends June 30th. And so again, this is information that we collected from our team so that we understand our quarters, we know what's happening for BESE, we know legislative sessions, and we actually, it provides a roadmap for how we get our work done. Almost there. Okay, so I've talked about our key performance indicators. Currently, we have about 133 Division of Administration key performance indicators. So when Mr. Morris asked me how often will I give you all reports, I say quarterly. And so we have 1 or 2 options. I can sit in front of you every couple of months and give a report on 133 key performance indicators, or we can prioritize those indicators that we know will give us, as I talked about before, those highest return on investment, or the priorities that we really speak to as what is the work of the agency? What is the work that we are really prioritizing this year? And so what you see aligned here are our highest level priority indicators. It does not mean that all the other work that we're doing is not important, but these are the things that we are highlighting and that we will bring before you quarterly so that you can see our progress towards our goals and our key performance indicators. So under our priority 1, career, college, and service readiness, you have several key performance indicators listed there. And again, these are our inputs. What is the data telling us? And then we will begin to measure that. The one thing that I will say about year 1 is I talked about procedural and technical changes. Right now, you see quantitative data. As we move into year 2, our goal is to get to those qualitative pieces that will really give value to the work that we're doing and really give us a measurement for our return on investment. Okay. So I won't go through these word for word, but I wanted to give you all an idea of how we will demonstrate our progress toward objective, goal, and indicator attainment. And so we do have key performance indicators for each priority area. I see you sitting up, Mr. Moore, so we can go all the way to slide 30.
If you don't mind, I see Mr. Ford still in the room. He expressed an interest earlier today, a concern, I guess, earlier today about the strength of the graduation diploma. So if you could go back to slide 25, I just wanted to share what I thought was a really good KPI you guys have developed that would address his concern. So if you look at your priority 1, KPI category, and the high priority KPI within that category, you see the ITP on row 1. And so if you look at your indicator, then one thing you could be stewarding would be your partnership with the vendor that's going to manage the ITP program with students. But you could take it to a different level and you could say, okay, we've got these graduation plans in place, the KPIs tracking the number of plans the vendors put in place. You can go to the next level. You could say, okay, they're graduating, what's the quality of that diploma? Your KPI is going to track the different levels that the student has accomplished, right, with accreditation of the diploma. So it gives you very close look at strength of diploma. You guys are tracking it on an annual basis, and you understand that you've got a target in place for each one of those accreditations on that diploma. Once you get your target in place, then you obviously got a challenging target. You've got a strategy in place to achieve your target. And then if in reality you're not at or above your target, then you're creating a gap. It's a lost opportunity gap. You know you've got a flag. You bring it to BESE. You tell them BESE, hey, we're not achieving our target. This is a high priority KPI, and we're going to readjust our strategy to close that gap. But now we've got the degree of resolution on an annual basis to address that concern. That was the best example that I thought we covered, and as well I covered Mr. Ford's concerns. I just want to share them.
Absolutely. The one thing that I would add to that, with my experience being in 2 school systems, one being St. John the Baptist Parish School System and then East Baton Rouge Parish School System, and then also Superintendent Brumley having been in Jefferson. The work that we talk about doing with getting academic return on investment and really knowing how to track progress towards student outcomes and success is really demonstrated by the success that we've had in the school systems in which we've worked in. And so this isn't like new work, for us, but what I will say for the Department of Education, it is probably more strategic work. And not only is it more strategic here from a SEA level, but it also provides a model for our LEAs. So when we think about strategic planning of all of our resources, it's really linking us to student outcomes and not just waiting for an annual assessment, but how do we track that progress over time to make sure that we are all moving in the same direction. And if we are not moving in the same direction, then what gaps do we assess, and then what changes do we need to make in order to make student outcomes a reality for all kids?
Exactly. And just one other point we talked about yesterday as well is that you guys are putting these this level of resolution together, bringing high priority KPIs to BESE, on an appropriate frequency. You're also accumulating all this data, so that when the federal funding runs out in 3 years, you've proven that this KPI demonstrates that, hey, with the appropriate amount of funding, we can really make a difference in kids' lives. And so, then we'll be able to go back to the legislature and make a strong case for additional funding to sustain the program. So I just want to keep that in mind as well.
Absolutely, thank you. And so lastly, if we move to slide 30. Okay, so you should have slide 30 in your packet. They're not on our presentation. But we do have our future reporting opportunities and how that will look for you as a board. And so we will, and we have identified our highest priority key performance indicators, and we will provide regular updates to BESE. And below is just a sample table of how those reports will actually come to you. Again, the columns will automatically populate red, yellow, or green to demonstrate the progress in comparison to our target. And so we also plan to make this visually appealing so that you can easily assess our progress. And the very...
When would we look to give our first quarterly report on the high priority KPIs?
That's actually on slide 31. Yep, so if you turn your attention to slide 31, your first highlight, I think, says December, at the December BESE.
Thank you, appreciate the work.
So finally, our commitments not only to you as a board, but also to our stakeholders. Again, is for our investments to have a collective impact, for our outcomes, our planning, for our planning to be outcome strategic and priorities based, and then for us to be transparent and accountable for how we use the resources that's been allocated to us. And then you also have a timeline relative to our next steps, and we will continually build out our operational plan, again, assessing our gaps and making adjustments where necessary, facilitating reviews with stakeholders to get feedback and input as we continually roll out resources, and then provide those quarterly updates to BESE, but also to the public. And I'll stop there.
Any other questions of Dr. Jim? Dr. Davis?
And if we have comments or questions about the indicators, specifically so they don't take up a lot of time, we can email you, since I know we've gone late. I'm just, like, for an example would be on the ACT indicator. You know, when we adopted the ACT as our end-all be-all of, how we were going to be, everything's geared to that, the accountability system, right? And so we have had that for well over a decade, and we have not moved our ACT scores at all, right? And so all of this accountability everything that we have tweaked and done has not budged that number. And so, I'm just wondering, are you setting yourself up for failure in a sense with that kind of indicator of a 1% increase growth? Because I guess, I just don't know, what are we doing differently that is going to move that ACT score for you in a timely manner, right? Because it's going to take a while for those kindergartners who we're going to do the science of reading to get all, that's 18 years from now, all of us will be long gone, right? And so, how often have we ever seen our ACT score, like the percent increase of 1%, up to an 18? Have we ever seen that?
I don't have the data right in front of me, but we did see increases in our ACT scores over time. A couple of the things that you can look to and see is that you actually start to see a decline around the time that ACT work keys exemption that we attempted to close today was put into effect. So we did see increases in ACT over time, particularly since 2012, but that has steadily declined since the opening of that work keys portal.
But we started out like in the 17s, and then we never got above that, right, for our average?
I believe that we got up to an 18.6. I don't have that data right now.
Yeah, we're saying mid-18s.
So, all right, but the movement was really constrained. And so I just want to make sure that a goal like that is realistic given the time it takes. Because all of our big heavy lifting on really moving kids is we're starting out in that K2 emphasis on literacy and the science of reading. And I don't want, I want to make sure those indicators are really realistic, because the ACT is just crazy hard to move. You can look at the national numbers and see that, so that's all. But so if I have like nitpicky questions like that, I'll just give you a call.
Absolutely. The one thing that I will add is many of the indicators you see in here were actually a part of our 5-year strategic plan. And so we actually have an opportunity to start working on that plan. And I know one of the asks from Ronnie Norris was, what help or what guidance can we as a board actually provide to the department? And so when we start rewriting that strategic plan, that's when we'll have the opportunity to update all of those key performance indicators, or the ones that we really believe should be updated so that it can target our growth.
Dr. Davis, also just from an access standpoint, one of the things that we committed to doing is providing funding for pre-ACT. We know if we can give our kids multiple exposure to that assessment, they're more likely to be successful. So we have that we're trying to do to help support our system so that kids get additional access. And the other thing is we have our study that is taking place around, what are some of the reasons why our ACT scores are not where we want them to be. And I think many of us already know some of those things that we believe to be true around that, but we're trying to, not influence that study so that that can run independent of us.
And one thing, since we're on ACT, and I feel compelled to make a few comments there, the score that you're talking about is the composite score. You're talking about the 18 and the 19 and the sub-scores of English and Math, which were the Board of Regents' minimum requirements to take dual enrollment courses. Now, they've suspended that for a year or two in looking at the statistics and allowing more kids in. But I think to Dr. Bromley's comments, and many of us have been pushing, our standards are not all aligned with the ACT assessment. As we well know, there are many items on the ACT that our standards do not address. So we have asked that we take a look primarily with our ELA math standards and look at the vertical alignment. And if ACT is the culminating test, it's what the legislature gives TOPS money to, what we make as part of our accountability program. And it's been very upsetting to all of us, I think, to not see our standards addressing some of the items that are assessed, some of some of the things that kids need to know to do well on it. So I've been assured that we're in conversations with LSU. I don't know where we are. Maybe you could talk a little bit about where we are in terms of a contract or something to get them to look at our standards and how they are aligned, and if they address those competencies.
Dr. Chesson could probably speak to that. She's been managing that workload.
Yeah, Superintendent Voce, as we spoke about a few weeks ago, we are in the process of securing a contract with LSU. The contract process is a lengthy one, but they have drafted a scope of work that we have both agreed on. And so we do hope to run you sometime during the spring semester and update a report from that contractual work with LSU around the ATT alignment study.
So we're hoping to see something when we think.
So that report will provide some key recommendations that we will then be able to take some actions on, according to what comes out of that report.
Any other questions for Dr. Tillman?
Bravo, Dr. Tillman.
Thank you so much. I know this is an incredible amount of work, and I think the framework is well set. We just need to get all the data. So thank you very much for all the work you did. Next item.
On page 168, item 7.
Wait, did I complete? I didn't do the vote yet, right? I'm sorry. Any objections to the motion? Hearing none, motion passes. Next item, please.
Item number 7.2, consideration of an update report regarding the 2021 regular legislative session. Recommendation is to receive the report.
Motion to receive. Ms. Allen, second, Dr. Davis. Do we have a report or we just receiving?
No, I'd like to invite Ethan Alongside to the table. Ethan does our legislative work and is going to lead that strategy for the next session. And so I think it's just important that you give an overview of where we stand with a few key bills and then take any questions that you may have.
Thank you so much. Ethan Alongside, Director of Government Affairs for the department. In your packets, you'll see a legislative plan of action. I went through all of the the bills that were passed and were able to put down some actions of implementation of when we can expect reports to come before BESE, when we will complete them at the department. Also, if there's any policy revisions, you saw the first batch of that today on the last agenda. We will be bringing 2 more batches, one in October and one in December, with the rest of the legislative mandates that came down from the legislature that need to be put into policy. If you have any questions specifically about bills that passed in the session, I'm happy to answer them. We had a lot of successes this year, primarily around literacy, early literacy, and also with funding for early childhood education. Senate Bill 142, which is Act 435 now, earmarks 25% of the sports betting money to early childhood, and it's going to cap it annually at $20 million. So we're really excited to get a piece of that money that we can send it to the early childhood fund. We also had the MFP that got through that awarded $400, $800 teacher staff raises, so we're really excited about that one. And then we have the kindergarten bill that was passed by Senator Fields that we put into policy today for you. So.
Any questions?
I just want to say thank you for this, working with this, with the legislative process and being timely on the bills, responding. So I know it's a lot. It's a lot of work, but a lot for us to keep up with. Appreciate that. Thank you.
It's my honor to represent you across the state.
Dr. Davis?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I thought y'all were done. I was just going to say, this is what we used to do years ago. We used to have this plan come forward, and it's going to be so helpful for y'all. So keep this, it's going to be really helpful for us. If you look on, like for example, page 170, you'll see that HR 101 is going to come to you for approval in December. So staff knows we can take this now and we can go put in our template of December. There's going to be an item on the on whatever agenda to revise policy, and you all know that it's coming so that it's not just there all of a sudden. And then the report would be submitted in January, so that also Ms. Holloway's not just approving reports on off months, and we're planning things out. So I just want to also reiterate that I appreciate this report under the direction of the leadership of the board.
Dr. Davis?
I was just curious, we've had some discussions about the learning pod bill and the fact that it has no guardrails on it, and it's just kind of a wild west out there. Is the author of that piece of legislation, is he working with us to try to figure out what we need to do to address that?
I have not had a conversation just yet with Representative Emerson. She had passed this with the intent of this being an option in school districts' toolbox to be able to work outside of that box, and also with the pandemic that was going on. We are in discussions right now with legal and with Dr. Peterson's team, EIO, to address some of those concerns, to see I can bring them to her and say we have some language cleanup we'll have to do. Knowing Representative Emerson, I don't want to put words in her mouth that she would do this, but she would usually be fine with going back for cleanup language. So we'll be working on that to make sure that we can issue guidance. If you notice in here, when it comes to learning pods, we don't have any action coming up yet because we are creating the guidance for that, and then the cleanup that would happen afterwards.
Thank you.
No problem.
Any other questions or discussion? Any objections to the motion? Hearing none, motion passes.
Thanks, Mr. Long.
That concludes your agenda.